What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing probably the biggest surprise to me so far this season on just how much better this Pokemon plays after getting buffed, and that Pokemon, believe it or not, is Shadow Kyogre. Now for the team, I'm running a full team of legendaries that got buffed both this season but also last season with Shadow Mewtwo, Urshifu, and of course Shadow Kyogre. Now back to the Kyogre, this Pokemon has honestly felt like one of the most useless Pokemon that I've ever invested in for the Great League, and actually last season when it gained access to Avalanche, I also used an Elite Charge DM to give it Origin Pulse, which at the time felt like a complete waste because it took so long to get there that I genuinely don't think I managed to land a single Origin Pulse the previous time I used it. But of course, this season it plays so much differently. It can actually get to Charge Moves now because it's generating 2 more energy per waterfall, and man, this thing can nuke pretty much anything outside of the super bulky water types where of course both Avalanche and Origin Pulse are resisted. But yeah, I genuinely don't think a Pokemon has ever felt this strong in the closing position when all shields are down, and Shadow Mewtwo is a Pokemon that does a pretty good job of getting all shields down. So despite the fact that they don't really cover each other's weaknesses at all, the team actually worked out exactly the way I wanted it to. Anyways, with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. Which buffed Pokemon has surprised you the most at just how much better it feels to play this season? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Let's go into the first battle, leading Shadow Mewtwo into Altaria. So this is going to be a fairly neutral matchup here. Of course, Dragon Breaths are going to add up over time. The opponent tries to catch a resisted charge move onto Shadow Drapion, and I can come in with my Urshifu. Now, unless they have Sludge Bomb, I'm going to resist all the charge moves here. However, they do end up getting a Crunch debuff. I'm not going to bait here. I'm going straight for Aqua Jet, grabbing a shield advantage, and the opponent not going to be able to commit to a full farm down. So instead, I'm going to let Urshifu go down. Aqua Tail gets the KO there, but that's okay with me. I can come in with the Shadow Kyogre, and the opponent unfortunately will now reach another Crunch. Crunch is going to grab a shield, but it does not get the debuff this time around. However, they can just barely outpace me to a Sky Attack before I get to the Avalanche. I'm now going to look to overfarm in this matchup, and I will fire for the Avalanche before they reach the next Sky Attack. Avalanche is not respected. It gets the one-shot. They come in with Shadow Empoleon, and of course, I've got Shadow Ball on my Mewtwo. So the opponent no shields the Origin Pulse. That is resisted damage, but it still gets the one-shot there, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's over there into the next battle. I see Shadow Palkia in the lead. This is a bit of a tricky matchup for my backline for sure. Looks like the opponent is lagging at the start there, so I guess I'm going to take advantage of that, go straight for a Side Strike. The opponent committing to a full Dragon Tail farm down, but I'm able to reach a second Side Strike. Of course, expecting to grab both shields. However, I don't really have a way of farming down this Pokemon, as Waterfall on both my remaining Pokemon are going to be double resisted. We're going to no shield here. They do blind throw the Aqua Tail, and I expect the same thing again. So no shield again. Aqua Tail doesn't KO, but it unfortunately puts me into Dragon Tail farm down range, so I've not played this one particularly well here, but we're going to shield as they go for another Aqua Tail, but they do not reach a third up against the Kyogre. So now they come in with an Umbreon, a super bulky Pokemon. I'll be honest, I'm not entirely certain if Origin Pulse will get the KO here, so I'm just going to use my final shield, look to overfarm as much as possible. I realize I'm at 100 energy. Origin Pulse gets the one shot there. They come in with a Galarian Slowbro, and this time we don't need to overfarm. I'm going straight for it. Origin Pulse gets the one shot once again, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's over there into the next battle. I'm going to see Shadow Mewtwo into Shadow Quagsire. So, of course, this is a fine matchup. They will outpace me to the first charge move if they go for an Aqua Tail, but the opponent not going to throw straight away, meaning Side Strike going to grab a shield advantage, and now I swap into Urshifu, where I expect to resist all of the charge moves. If they're on Aqua Tail and Stone Edge, both of those moves are resisted, although that still does quite a lot of damage there, but they actually swap into Empoleon. Now, yes, they are resisting Waterfall, but, of course, Brick Break is super effective. It does decent damage, and it puts them into range where hopefully Kyogre can come in and just Waterfall farm them down. I'm hoping to get that farm down before they reach another charge move, and Kyogre going to be able to do exactly that. Getting a decent farm down there, they come in with the Shadow Quagsire, and they do have enough energy for another Stone Edge, so I will shield, I will respect it, and they full send. Unfortunately, we're barely not able to get the farm down. I recognize this is just an Aqua Tail, but you know what? We've got so much energy, I might as well shield there, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Forret. And once again, the opponent does not shield Origin Pulse again, getting the complete one-shot there, taking out the Forret, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into next battle, a very awkward core breaker as we're going to see a Galvantula in the lead. Unfortunately for me, it looks like they will be able to Volt Switch farm me down in the 2-shield scenario, but the opponent is going to throw just before we get to the next charge move. I'm actually going to shield this just because I can go for another Side Strike, however the opponent ends up catching it onto Talonflame. Of course, that is still going to do quite a lot of damage despite the fact that I was debuffed there. I'm now going to come in with the Urshifu and I can go for a perfect Waterfall farm down. Now, let's wait to see what they come in with. They come back in with the Galvantula, and I do expect to grab a shield here, so I'm going to go for a Brick Break bait, and the opponent is going to end up shielding, but they do a brilliant job of over-farming perfectly. Of course, if they threw slightly earlier there, I think I Waterfall farm them down with the Kyogre, as we, of course, are a Shadow, whereas now, unfortunately, they've got more Peko in the back. I'm going to shield this. I kind of have to throw straight away. However, I'm pretty sure Galvantula does have a charge move loaded, so if they've got another discharge loaded, there's unfortunately nothing I can do here. The opponent did bank the move before swapping out, and as a result, Discharge will be taking out the Shadow Kyogre, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's opponent there into the next battle and see Shadow Mewtwo into Fortress, so not a great matchup for me. However, I'm going to stay in because I wasn't sure if maybe they'd be on Volt Switch, and it turns out they are, so I'm definitely glad I did not swap out of that matchup. They go for a Sand Tomb, debuffing my defense stat there. I don't think I'm going to get to back-to-back charge moves here, so I just full send a Shadow Ball, and I'm able to connect. I now come in with the Urshifu. Yes, this is just going to be another Sand Tomb. It's not going to deal too much damage, and the opponent swaps into Shadow Gliscor. Now, again, I expect to grab a shield here as we do have the threat of an Aqua Jet, so I'm able to grab a shield with the Brick Break and debuff their defense. Now, hopefully this is going to allow Shadow Kyogre to come in and Waterfall farm them down, but unfortunately it looks like they will just barely hang on to another Waterfall. They go for the Sand Tomb. I'm forced to swap out, clear the debuff there, and catch the charge move onto my Mewtwo. Sand Tomb gets the KO, we get the Waterfall farm down, and the opponent's final Pokemon is going to be a Shelgon. Now, they do have the opportunity to make a catch, so I hold on to the energy, and as a result, Shadow Kyogre just barely able to farm up to back-to-back avalanches. First one grabs the final shield, and the second avalanche here, super effective damage into Shelgon, easily gets the one shot, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle, and see Shadow Zapdos in the lead. So, this is going to be a slightly awkward matchup for me, just because they will be able to outpace me in the one-shield scenario. The opponent actually makes a really nice catch there, catching a Side Strike resisted damage onto their Shadow Drapion. Now, I'm going to bank very close to a Side Strike, swap out there just in case they go for an Aqua Tail, and it turns out they actually do exactly that. So, at this point, the opponent just going to settle for another Aqua Tail, which is fine with me, as of course, this is resisted damage, it's also non-stab, and we can go for a full farm down. Now, they come back in with the Zapdos. I'm going to go straight for Brick Break here. Brick Break is going to drop the defense. Once again, able to bait there and drop the defense. I'm now going to come in with the Shadow Kyogre as these Waterfalls are really going to start to chunk. Going to shield the Drill Peck. The opponent's going to swap out now into their Quagsire. And I'm in a bit of an awkward situation because I believe Zapdos is going to win CMP up against my Kyogre. And they did also bank a charge move. Mewtwo would win CMP, but we don't quite have a Side Strike loaded. So I'm not really sure what to do here. So I'm going to farm up to back-to-back charge moves. But unfortunately, if I try and swap out here into my Mewtwo, they can just fire off the charge move. So I hoped maybe they'd expect that and not throw straight away. But the opponent goes for Drill Peck, and Mewtwo needs to go for a Psycho Cut farm down. We're not able to do so. I throw here just in case we put them into 1 HP range, but unfortunately, we're not able to do that. And as a result, they use the final shield. Drill Peck takes out the Shadow Mewtwo, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's opponent there into the next battle to see Spidops in the lead. That is not a great matchup for me. I'm going to be swapping out straight away into Urshifu, and the opponent's going to stay in here. They're going to go straight for a Lunge. This is fine with me. Lunge is going to be resisted damage. However, of course, it is going to drop my attack stat. They then come in with the Dene. I can go for Aqua Jet. Aqua Jet still does decent damage there, and the opponent cannot go for a full farm down. They are forced to throw. So at this point, Parabolic Charge is going to, of course, get the KO. It's going to boost up the defense stat, but actually, that sets up a very nice farm down for my Shadow Mewtwo. I can shield the next move here. They're going to boost up their defense once again, giving me even more farm. I come out with 99 energy, and let's see what they want to do. The opponent's going to come back in with the Spidops, so I will just unleash back-to-back Side Strikes. First one grabs the first shield there. Are they going to double shield the Spidops? Side Strike is going to be double shielded. We now swap into our Shadow Kyogre, and the opponent, of course, going to stay in and once again go for another lunge. Lunge, going to debuff my attack stat there, but they swap into Clodsire, and you know what? I am full sending the Origin Pulse. However, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go for a slight undercharge, and that doesn't KO. That gives me one extra Waterfall. The opponent probably just did not expect that, and as a result, I'm able to just barely outpace them by a single turn, reaching Avalanche. Avalanche gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle. Going to see an Alolan Marowak in the lead. So, not a great lead matchup for me. I will be swapping out into my Urshifu, as it turns out they are on Hex. So, Hex going to do quite a lot of damage there into my Mewtwo. They swap into Politoed, and that's not that bad for me because I expect they probably have Weather Ball and maybe Ice Beam for coverage. So, I'm going to no-shield this. It's not Weather Ball, it's a Surf, but that is still resisted damage, so it doesn't really matter. I can go for Brick Break number 2. Brick Break, not going to be shielded. Drops the defense once again, and I can Waterfall farm them down. We come out with a little bit of residual energy here, but unfortunately they're going to come in with a Charge Bug, and Charge Bug does really badly core break the team here, especially with a slight energy advantage like they've got here. They're going to go for an X-Scissor, they swap back into Marowak, and I can make the catch onto my Shadow Kyogre. However, Shadow Bone still does big damage there. The opponent is going to be forced to throw some energy, and you know what? I think I have to shield here. However, I don't think it's really going to help me. I come out with the Avalanche loaded, and yes, Avalanche probably grabs a shield here. I can probably grab another shield with my Shadow Mewtwo with Side Strike, but they do still have another shield, and as a result, they now have the energy for another X-Scissor, and X-Scissor is super effective damage. It will very comfortably take out the Shadow Mewtwo, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's opponent into the next battle. Going to see a Scrafty in the lead, so that is not a great matchup for me at all. However, of course, they are dark and fighting type Pokemon, so they only take single resisted damage from the Psychic typing. This is also just a power-up punch, which is resisted, so I'm going to no-shield that, and now fire off back-to-back Side Strikes. First one, going to grab a shield there. Second one probably will connect, but it's not going to do too much damage. But honestly, being resisted, that is pretty respectable. And at this point, I think I'm going to shield just in case they're on Thunder Punch. They do go for Foul Play. That would have been resisted damage there, but I didn't really want to take a risk, so we do go for a full farm down. But unfortunately, they come in with an Azumarill. Now, I've only got resisted hits to throw. I'm going to go for Brick Break. I actually grab a shield there. The opponent probably just has no clue what Pokemon I'm running, and they also only settle for an Ice Beam. Ice Beam is not enough damage to get the KO, so this time I will go for an Aqua Jet. You could argue that Brick Break's still not going to do that much less damage than the Aqua Jet. I might as well have just debuffed them again, but of course, they do have the chance to clear that debuff. So now, we're going to come in with a Shadow Kyogre. I'm hoping I can go for a full Waterfall farm down, but unfortunately just barely going to miss out before they reach another Ice Beam. And again, yes, Ice Beam is resisted, but Kyogre is a very glassy Pokemon. Now they come in with, unfortunately, another Pokemon that is a very bulky water type, but Origin Pulse does big damage, and I'm able to swap out and catch the Charge Move onto Urshifu. They're actually on Bubble Beam, which is quite surprising, but we can now outpace them to an Avalanche, and whilst, yes, this is resisted damage, we put them into range where Avalanche, non-stab, still gets the KO up against the bulky Gelatin, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent is the next battle. You can see Pelipper in the lead. So again, a little bit of an awkward matchup here just because, of course, they will outpace me in the one-shield scenario. We do win CMP to that first Charge Move. However, of course, it only takes 4 wing attacks this season to get to the second Weather Ball. Of course, I also have Urshifu in the back where we're going to take super effective damage from the wing attacks, but I'm actually going to swap into my Kyogre. Now, I did not use Kyogre as a safe swap outside of this single battle, and you're going to see the reason for that is because even though we've got a huge edge advantage, we still don't quite reach an Origin Pulse here. So at this point, I'm just going to fully sacrifice it. That is unfortunate for me, but of course, we can now come in with the Urshifu. I expect them to be on Trailblaze here, so I will, of course, shield the first Charge Move and then look to overfarm in this matchup. They go for Trailblaze there. I'm now going to go for Brick Break. Brick Break, I'm hoping, should be enough damage to KO from this range, and it does get the KO. Come back in with the Pelipper. This is just going to be a Weather Ball, so I can no-shield this. Well, I mean, I've got no shields anyways, but now I can reach an Aqua Jet. And this time, I'm not baiting. Aqua Jet is going to be resisted. It doesn't KO, but I can snipe with my Shadow Mewtwo. Their final Pokemon is going to be a Medicham, and my only win condition, really, is if they call a bait here. So Shadow Ball, unfortunately, is shielded, but then they overfarm massively. You can see they went for 1 extra Psycho Cut. I actually would have reached a second Shadow Ball there. I'm really annoyed at myself for not just committing to another Shadow Ball there, and as a result, of course, we come in with the Urshifu. Even a resisted Ice Punch from this range gets the KO, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's opponent there into the next battle. We're going to see Licky in the lead. So this is a neutral matchup here. Of course, will be better for the Urshifu, but the opponent's actually going to swap out into Furret. So I'm going to stay in, go for a Side Strike. Side Strike does huge damage, and it puts them into Waterfall farm down range before they can reach a Trailblaze. Now this part, I'm going to go straight for Brick Break here. Of course, Brick Break does have a 100% chance to debuff their defense stat, and they end up shielding. Now, they farmed up so much energy. Ice Shield, they do full send a Shadow Ball there, but that's fine with me. We can now go for another Brick Break. Brick Break number 2, gonna be double shielded by the Licky, and the opponent gonna swap out there, clear the debuff, but they swap into a Talonflame. That's fine with me. We can go for an Aqua Jet. We do go for a slight undercharge. That gives me 1 extra Waterfall. It doesn't really make a difference there. But at this point, of course, I've still got a shield. They've got quite a lot of energy, so I will just no shield here. Come in with the Mewtwo, force them to throw some more energy, and then come in with my Shadow Kyogre, and surely they can't have much more energy than this. They do reach yet another Body Slam, but I can just safely shield this up. Of course, Body Slam is not going to connect there. Waterfall gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. Really awkward core breaker for me as we're going to lead into Araquanid. I'm going to stay in, and I'm just going to hope that the opponent, since they are super bulky, lets the Side Strike go through, and they actually do. But we come in with the Urshifu. We do resist everything they could throw there. However, they just bank a ton of energy and come in with Altaria. Brick Break, of course, is going to be resisted. So is Aqua Jet. But yeah, I don't really know what my play is here. So I'm going to shield this Charge Reef. I think I'm going to go for another Aqua Jet here this time around, as it is going to do a little bit more damage, and then my Switch Clock is coming up right now, so I'm going to wait a few turns, swap out, catch the Charge Move onto my Shadow Mewtwo, preserving some HP on my Urshifu, but honestly, we are just so low at this point, so I think I'm going to have to come in with the Kyogre here, and I don't think I can quite go for a full Waterfall farm down. Just barely not able to do so. So as a result, I'm going to use my final shield. I do have close to an Avalanche loaded. Actually, I do have the Avalanche loaded, so they come back in with a Araquanid. I'm going straight for it, and then I'm going to swap into Urshifu, and the opponent is going to throw here. So, of course, able to catch a Bug Buzz, which still gets the KO. Can we get the Waterfall farm down? It doesn't look likely. The opponent actually didn't even need to throw a charge move. They're able to farm me down, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's opponent there into the next battle. We're going to see Swampert in the lead. So once again, another slightly awkward matchup for me because we will win CMP in the first scenario here. But of course, they will then outpace me by 2 turns to the second charge move. So once again, I'm going to shield the first move here. And then I'm going to swap into my Urshifu and catch a resisted Hydro Cannon onto the Urshifu. So that still does decent damage. They're going to swap into Florges. And the opponent not going to throw straight away. Instead, maybe committing to a full farm down. But Aqua Jet does decent damage, and it puts them into range where a single Waterfall KOs. Now, I'm expecting the opponent's just going to blind Chilling Water me, so I come in with Kyogre, and I'm actually going to no-shield this. The opponent does go for the Chilling Water. That is resisted damage. It does debuff me, however, but I'm going to swap into Mewtwo, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Galarian Weezing, and as a result, Side Strike grabs the final shield. They overfarm. They allow me to reach a second Side Strike. Side Strike is super effective. It gets the KO, and the opponent just concedes the match. So, GG's opponent into the next battle. We can see Shadow Mewtwo into Unova Stunfisk. Now, of course, Mud Bomb did get slightly reworked this season, so it's going to do slightly more damage, but also cost slightly more energy. I'm going straight for Side Strike. Side Strike does big damage there. I'm going to no-shield this because I'm hoping I can still reach another Charge Reef, and since they go for discharge, I'm actually able to do exactly that, reaching another Side Strike just before they farm me down, and of course grabbing a shield advantage. Now, of course, we are going to use that shield straight away, but I will get a slight energy advantage on my Shadow Kyogre. The opponent's going to come in with Altaria, and we do have Avalanche for coverage. I'm hoping they're not aware of this, so I'm going straight for Avalanche. Avalanche is unfortunately shielded by the Altaria, and they can now outpace me to the next charge move. Of course, I'm going to shield this. They go for Sky Attack. They swap into Empoleon, and I'm going to swap out. I try to catch a charge move there, but it doesn't really matter as Drill Peck is super effective damage, and you're going to see we are barely going to miss out on reaching a Brick Break there, and that is going to cost me this game. I can go for Origin Pulse. We've already seen Origin Pulse does huge damage. It gets the KO, but Kyogre is sadly just way too low there. They can just Dragon Breath farm me down before we reach the Avalanche, and unfortunately I do lose that game. But GG to them there into, I believe, the final battle of this video, leading into Wigglytuff, going for 7 Psycho Cuts here before firing off the Side Strike. Side Strike gonna be shielded, and the opponent actually could have committed to a full charm farm down, but they don't, and as a result, I'm fine with that. They use their energy, whereas now we can come in with the Kyogre, and they will reach another Swift. And unfortunately, even though I'm not exactly taking super effective damage from the charms, they are still chunking, so I'm gonna be forced to swap into my Urshifu, but I'm able to get the snipe there. We've got a lot of energy on the Kyogre. Let's see, they're going to come in with a Gastrodon, so I'm going to look to throw an Oxjet on CMP. I'm hoping to grab a shield here, as Kyogre does kind of need all shields down. The opponent is actually just going to no-shield that, which is the smart play. I'm now going to shield the Body Slam here, and we're going to overfarm as much as possible. I go for Break just in case the opponent does go for a shield there, but I don't expect them to do that. But their final Pokemon is a Drifblim, and they're not on Astonish, which means I should be able to live the next Hex damage. And as a result, we've got back-to-back avalanches. First one grabs the final shield, second one gets the one shot, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.